In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create this DNA medical visualization animation in Blender, and we're going to be using Eevee to render the animation. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the tutorial project files, you can get that with the links in the description on my Gumroad and Patreon. So I'm going to have my screencast keys right down here in the corner if you want to see what buttons I'm pressing, and because we're going to be using Eevee, I'm going to click right here on Cycles and just change the render engine over to Eevee. And then I'll go over a few Eevee settings. So here on the ray tracing, I'm going to turn on the ray tracing because it'll make Eevee look nicer. Then also I'm going to turn on the motion blur. You may not be able to see the motion blur that much because things are moving pretty slow, but I am going to turn on motion blur. And then let's go down here to the color management, and I'm going to use the view of Filmic, and I'm going to set the look to very high contrast to pop out the colors and make things more contrasted and saturated. Now later in the video, when we do the animation with the particles, I'm going to have the particles start to simulate in the negative values. And so then when the animation actually starts, all the particles will be in the scene. And so to actually make this look good, we need to bump the start frame over, because if we have it start at frame 1, there's going to be kind of a small glitch where you can't see the particles at the very starting. So to easily fix this, I'm going to make the start frame 2, and then I'll make the end frame 251. So this way, it's still going to be a 10-second animation with 250 frames, but the frames are just over or offset by 1 frame. So now I'm going to select everything with the A key, and I'll hit X, and we're going to delete everything. Let's go to the Add menu, and I'm going to go to Mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. Now right behind me, on the Add Cylinder settings, I'm going to turn the vertices to 12. So it's a bit lower poly. Then I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'll go here to the face select, and I'll select the top face and select the bottom face, and I'll just delete those faces. Why I'm deleting them is because we're going to add an array modifier to array it up, so I don't actually need extra faces in there, because this cylinder is going to be duplicated and arrayed up on top of itself to make the DNA object. Then I'm going to select everything, and in edit mode, I'm going to scale it down, and I'll type 0.2 just so it's a bit smaller. Let's now hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view. Now I'm going to hit G to grab, and then I'm going to hold down the control key. And the control key is going to turn on Blender's snapping feature. And I'm going to move it right over here, so by 2 grids. So you can see if you kind of zoom out here, there's like these grids in Blender on the front view. And so I want to move it over by 2 grids, so it's in the center here of these lines. Then I'll hit G to grab, and again I'll hold down Control to use the snapping feature, and I'll stick it right here so it's resting on the X-axis. Then I'm going to go to the Vertex select, I'll hold down Z and go into Wireframe, and I'll deselect everything, and I'll just click and drag to box select the top vertices, and then again I'll hit G, hold down Control, and I'll bring it up here, so holding down Control will snap it, and I'm going to bring it up right there so it's 1 grid tall. Then what I'm going to do is select everything with the A key, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, then I'll hit R to rotate, I'll type 90 and enter. So this is going to be kind of that ladder bit there on the DNA strand. So I'll hit G to grab and then hold down Control and just bring it right over there until it's back in the center of the 3D scene. Then I'll deselect everything, click and drag to box select this side, hit G to grab, hold down Control to snap it, and I'll stick it right down there in the very center of that other cylinder. Let's go back to object mode, and I'm going to go here to the modifiers. Let's click on add modifier, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier so it mirrors over to the other side. So I want to mirror it over on the X-axis, and then I also want to turn on the clipping button, and the clipping button is going to merge the vertices in the center. Let's hold down Z and go back to solid view, and then I'll use the object context menu and just shade it smooth. Let's go back into edit mode now, and I want to deselect everything, and then hit the L key with my mouse hovered over that piece, and I'm going to hit Alt S. So Alt S is going to scale the faces along the normals, so the direction of the faces, and I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. Click right there. We'll deselect everything. We'll hit L to select the linked vertices of this cylinder. So if I hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view and kind of zoom in here, I want to hit Alt S again, scale it up a little bit, and I want this to be about 6 grids, so 6 of these small grids. Deselect everything, hit L to select this one, and I'll hold down Z and go into wireframe. And I want this one to be about 4 tall, so Alt S, just bring it up a bit like that, so it's about 1, 2, 3, 4 of those grids tall. So I'll hold down Z, go back to solid view. Now later on in the video, I'm going to be adding a displace modifier to kind of make it noisy and bumpy, and so I want to add more geometry. So back in edit mode, I'm going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, and I'm going to hover my mouse right here, and then I'm going to type 6, and then I'm just going to left click and right click so the loops stay in the center. Then I'll hit Control R to add a loop cut here, and I'll type 20, and left click and right click so the loop stays in the center. We'll go back to object mode. Then I can save the file, so I'll just click on file and just save the project. And I'll just save this in a folder with my project files as dna.blend and just save Blender file. Now what I want to do is add the array modifier to array this up so it kind of has that DNA ladder shape. So I'm going to click on add modifier and I'm going to search for the array modifier. So let's scroll down here on the array modifier. Let's just open this up to make it bigger. So here we have the offset, and I'm going to turn the Z value to 1. So that way it's going up on the Z axis, but on the X offset, I'll turn this to 0. So now you can see we're getting that ladder shape. And then I can turn up the count. And I'm going to turn up this count to 20. So now if I zoom out here, it's being arrayed 20 times. Now what I want to do is add the simple deform modifier to twist it around. And if you've never used the simple deform modifier, then I do have a tutorial covering all of the settings of the simple deform, so you can check out that video with the link in the description. But let's click on add modifier, and we can search for simple deform. And then I'll scroll down here to the bottom. So you can see there's different types here, but we want to set it to twist it around. But instead of twisting it on the X-axis, we want to twist it on the Z-axis. So now you can see the ladder is starting to rotate around, and then to rotate it all the way around, we'll turn the angle here to 360 degrees. So type in 360. And now you can see that's definitely starting to look like a DNA strand. Now if I zoom in here, you can see there's a problem here. There's kind of like extra vertices there and it's not merging. So on the array modifier, we just need to turn on this merge setting and now it's going to merge together. So now that we've twisted this all the way around, I want to add another array modifier, and because it's twisted all the way around by 360 degrees, when we add another array, the bottom is going to connect to the top. So let's scroll up to the top here, we'll add modifier, we're going to add another array modifier, and what I can do is click on these little arrows just to make the arrays smaller, or to make all the modifiers smaller so I can see it better. So you can see we're building up kind of a big modifier stack. So you can see it's mirroring over on this side or arraying over on this side. So what I want to do is turn the X offset to 0 and the Z offset, I want to turn this to 1. And now you can see it's on top of each other. But if I zoom in here, you can see there's still that little like seam right there. And that's because I need to go down here and turn on the merge setting on the array, and that's going to merge those extra vertices. So now we can make this really long and make it as big as we want. And I'm just going to turn the count up to 5. You could make it longer if you want to, but 5 should be good for this project. Now what I want to do is I want to add that kind of blobby bits on the side to make it look kind of blobby and random so it's not super straight. So let's just minimize this array. I'll click on add modifier and I'm first going to search for subdivision surface modifier. So this is going to add more geometry and smooth it out, but it's going to get quite laggy because this object is pretty high poly already, but I want to add an extra subdivision so it has even more detail for when we add the displacements. So I'm going to turn the levels viewport to 0, but I'll turn the render levels to 2. So this way you won't actually be able to see the subdivision in the viewport, so the viewport will be a little bit faster, but then once we render the scene, it'll render it with 2 subdivisions. So let's now add the displace modifier. So we'll click on add modifier, we're going to search for the displace modifier, and then we want to add a new texture, so let's click on new. Then we're going to click on this little button here, which is going to go to the texturing tab. And instead of image or movie, I want to change this to clouds, which is basically Blender's procedural noise texture. Now on the size here, I'm going to turn this to a 0.6, so it's a bit bigger. Then I can click back here to go to the modifier properties, and I can drag this strength value, and I'm going to turn the strength value to a 0.2, not a 0.1, but a 0.2, just so it's a bit more subtle. So now you can see it looks a little bit bumpy. Now this is not actually what it's going to look like when it's rendered, because you can see if I turn the levels viewport up, you might not want to do this because it might lag your scene or crash your scene, but you can see if I turn this up to a 2, this is what it's going to look like when it's rendered. So you can see it's actually a lot more bumpy and it has a lot more detail. But so that the scene doesn't lag too much, I'm going to turn the viewport levels down to 0 again. Let's hit Control S to save the project, and then I can minimize these 2 modifiers. So that is it for the modeling of the DNA strand. Now real quick before we continue, I want to let you know about my recently released Blender course. In this Blender course, I will teach you photorealistic interior creation in Blender. So throughout this tutorial series, I'll show you the entire process of creating this realistic kitchen interior scene. So what will you learn in this course? You'll learn how to model to the real life world scale, how to block out interior scenes, you'll learn interior modeling like windows, cabinets, and countertops, you'll learn how to set up texture maps and edit the UV maps. You'll learn how to create basic procedural materials like brick, plastic, and metal, how to add surface imperfections to objects to add realism, how to add decals to objects within the materials, using multiple UV maps to place textures, decals, and surface imperfections. You'll learn furniture modeling like bar stools, an oven, a fridge, a microwave, and more. You'll learn object and prop modeling like mugs, plates, vases, switches, and more. and we'll be going over some compositing effects to add more realism to your render. And you can find the links to the course in the video description. Alright, so we're now going to start rigging the DNA strand. So what I want to do is add some empty objects, and the empty objects can be used to kind of rig and animate the DNA strand. So I'm going to hit Shift C, which is going to center the 3D cursor to the center of the 3D scene. So I'll now go to the Add menu, and I'm going to go here to Empty, and I'm going to add a Sphere Empty. And I'll just hit S and scale up the Sphere Empty a little bit, then I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and hit Escape so it stays where it is, and then hit S and just scale it up a little bit more. So this way we have two empty objects. Now why I'm adding two empty objects is because we're going to use the main object, the DNA, and we're going to use this to animate the rotation. But then what we're going to do is use this object to animate the location to move it up and down. But then once we do all of that, we'll still have this object, and so I can move this object around, and this will move everything, so we can kind of move it around in our scene. So what I'm going to do is select the DNA and then shift select the smaller sphere here. And I'll hit Control P and we'll set parent to object, keep transform. So now if I select this and rotate it, you can see it's moving along. But then I want this one to control everything. So I'm going to select the small sphere and then shift select the large sphere, hit Control P, set parent to object, keep transform. So this will now control everything. So now what I want to do is animate the DNA strand rotating. So what we're going to do is go to frame 0, and then I'm going to click here to go to the object data properties and open up the transform. And so we can use this Z value to rotate it, rotating around. So what I'm going to do is first add a keyframe here. So what you can do is hover your mouse over the value and hit the I key, or you can click on this little dot here next to the value, and that's going to insert a keyframe. Now I'm going to go to the very end, and the end is 251 frames. So then here on the Z, I find that turning this to like a 200 is a pretty good spin. So I'll turn it to 200, and then I'm going to click on that diamond there to add another keyframe. So if I hit the spacebar to play this, you can see now it's just slowly spinning, but you can see it speeds up, and then at the end it kind of slows down. So to fix this, I'll hit the A key to select all the keyframes in the timeline. Then I'll hit T, which is going to bring up the keyframe interpolation, and I'm going to click on linear, which will make it so it doesn't slowly speed up and then slowly slow down. It'll be a linear animation, so it plays at the exact same speed. So now what I'm going to do is select the large circle controller, and I'll hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'm going to rotate it over a bit, and then I'm going to go to the side here and rotate it back a bit, and just drag it down here. So something like that. Then I'm going to add a camera, so I'll hit Shift A for the Add menu, and I'll just add a camera, and I'll just move my view to where I want the camera to be. So maybe I want the camera to be somewhere around here, and I'll hit Control-Alt numpad 0. So Control-Alt numpad 0 will bring the camera to my view, and then an easy way to move the camera around is to click on this button to show the gizmos, and then if you hit the 0 on the numpad, that'll go in and out of the camera view, and inside the camera view, I'll click on the View Navigation Lock here for the camera, so now if I move my view around, the camera's going to move with my view. So I'm just going to move maybe a little bit down here, kind of over to the side, something like that, so we get a nice view of our DNA strand kind of coming up there. So maybe zoom in a little bit, something like that. And then make sure to click on the lock icon to turn it off, so now the camera isn't going to move with your view. And then I'd just like to hide the gizmos just because I don't use them most of the time. Let's hit Control S to save the project. So now what I want to do is move the DNA strand slowly moving up through the scene. So I'm going to select the small icosphere, not the big one, but just the small one. And we are going to click here to go to the object data properties. And you can see because this is parented and we rotated it with the larger one, I can go to the location Z. And if I turn this up and down, it's going to move on its Z axis. But why it's not moving up and down like this is because we rotated it with the other object. So it's basically moving up and down on its own local Z axis. So I'll go into the camera view and I'll drag this over to frame 0. And I'll just take the location Z value and just kind of drag it back a little bit. Maybe that far, maybe to around like a -15. I could type in like -15, somewhere around there. And then I'm just going to click on that little dot there to add a keyframe. Now I'm going to go to the very end, which the very end is 251. And then what I'm going to do is take the Z value and just type in 0, and then click on that diamond there to add a keyframe. Then we need to hit A to select the keyframes, make sure the object is selected, and hit A to select the keyframes. And I'll hit T, and I'm going to set the type to linear. So now if I hit the spacebar to play this, you can see it's moving at a consistent speed. So we just have a nice slow animation. And then I think I'll select the camera and drag the camera down a little bit to make sure it fits the scene. So I want to make sure the end of the DNA strand and the starting of the DNA strand isn't visible where the camera is. So that's pretty good. And if you wanted to, you could of course turn up that array modifier to make the DNA strand longer. Now, why we did this rigging setup with these two icospheres is because now what I can do is select the large one, and I can still move the large one around. So I can rotate it and move it around, but if I play the animation, you can see moving this around isn't actually going to affect the animation. So that's really useful. So if I want to just kind of move it around a little bit, I can easily do that. So now what I'm going to do is select the DNA strand and then hold down the shift key and select these two empties, but I want to select the large empty last. So what I want to do now is duplicate them around the scene. So I'll hit shift D to duplicate, drag it here, and then if I just select the large empty, I can just move this around, but when I press the spacebar to play, it's not going to mess up the animation. So I'll hit the 0 to go into the camera view, and I'll drag this up here, move it up, something like that. Let's take a look at this, maybe rotate it over slightly. I can also go to top view and like rotate it over a little bit. So I'm now going to hold down the shift key and select all three objects, but I'm going to select the large empty last, and I'll hit shift D to duplicate it again and drag it down here over like that, maybe rotate it a little bit. All right, move it back a little bit. All right, so just something like that. So these DNA strands, they're going to be kind of farther back into the scene, and they're going to be a bit blurred and not quite as visible. And so because of that, because they're going to be farther away, I'm going to make it a bit less dense by going here to the modifiers, and on the subdivision modifier, the subdivision surface, we can just delete that. So this way they're going to be a bit more low quality, but you're not going to be able to see them in that much detail anyways, because they're going to be farther in the background and blurred. So let's just select the other DNA strand here in the back, and we'll just delete the subdivision surface modifier. And let's hit Ctrl S to save the project. So now what I want to do is animate the camera a little bit. So I'm going to click here to select the camera, and let's drag it all the way back to frame 0. And what I'm going to do is rotate the camera, and then I'll drag the camera down a bit and maybe move it out a bit by hitting G to grab. And then I can double tap the Z key to drag it out a little bit like that. So G to grab, double tap Z, drag it out, and then just move it over. So just move it a little bit farther back. Then I'm going to hit the K button to add keyframes, and we're going to add location, rotation, scale. Then what I'm going to do is drag the playhead over, and we're going to go to the very end, so 251, and I'll hit G to grab, and then double tap the Z key, and we're going to drag it in a bit, and then I'll rotate it over a little bit like that, something like that. So we have just a very basic camera animation, so it kind of looks like the camera's floating through a scene. Then we'll hit K. We're going to insert location, rotation, scale. Then again, we need to make this a linear animation. So I'll hit the A key in the timeline to select the keyframes, and I'll hit T, and we're going to set the type to linear. So if I play this now, you can see the camera's just kind of slowly moving through the scene, and that will make it look more interesting. So we are done with the animation, so we can now do the materials and also the world background. So let's first do the materials. So I'm going to click here to go to the shading workspace, and we'll click on new to add a new material. And I can call this DNA. Now I will go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for a noise texture. Let's drop the noise texture here. And then also, if you don't have the node wrangler enabled, you can click on edit, you can go to the preferences, and then here in the add-ons tab, go here to the add-on search and search for a node, and you can enable the node wrangler add-on, and I'll show you how to use it in the video. So if you select a procedural texture, you can hit Ctrl T, and that's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now I want to use the object coordinate, so I'm going to put the object into the vector. Let's hold down the Z button and go into the rendered viewport mode, and I'll just kind of zoom in here. And then what I'm going to do is Control Shift select the noise texture so I can preview it on the object. So let's change the settings. So I want to turn the scale to 2, and then this detail I want to turn up to 7, so it's a bit more detailed. So now I'm going to put this into the bump just to make it look a little bit more noisy and bumpy. So I'm going to put the factor into the normal, and then I'll just Control Shift select the principled shader, but I need to convert this to proper normal data. So I'll go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for the bump node, and I'll put it in between the noise and the principled shader. And then I want the factor to be going in the height value to convert it to bump data. Now this distance value, this is going to control like how big those bumps are, and I'm going to turn this to 1 so they look really big, and that way it's going to be very strong and you'll be able to see it better. But now what I want to do is add a cool emission effect, and I want to have like the edges be really white and glowing, and then the inside just kind of be like blue. So I'm going to go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for the Fresnel node. We'll drop the Fresnel right here, and I can just Control Shift select it to preview it. Now on the Fresnel, you can see if I drag this IOR, that's going to make it lighter and darker. And basically what the Fresnel is doing is it's making the faces which are more angled away from our view more white. So you can see if I move around, you can see it's actually changing. So wherever I move around, always the angled faces are going to be more white. But then the faces which are pointing straight at us, that's going to be dark. So we're going to use this to create a really cool effect where it's kind of glowing on the edges. Now what I'm going to do is search for ramp, and we're going to add a color ramp and put this here after the Fresnel. And so now I can change the colors. So I'm going to drag the black tab over, so there's a little bit more black, so I'll drag the black over here. And then I'm going to click on the white tab, and I'm going to make it like a very, very slightly light blue color. And if you want to use the same hex code, you can go here to the hex value here on the color wheel, and you can punch in D7, F9, FF. Now let's go over here to the black tab, and on the black tab, I'm going to make this kind of a dark blue. And if you want to use the same hex code that I'm using, you can punch in a hex code of 2C, 57, BC. So now you can see there's white on the edges, and then there's blue in the middle. But what I want to do is also go here to this IOR value and kind of drag the IOR value, and I'm going to turn the IOR value to 3 so that you can just see a little bit more of it. So now you can kind of see the white is just kind of blending there and kind of fading away on the edges. Let's box select these nodes and drag them down. So I am eventually going to be putting this into the emission value to make the material glowing, but you can see right here in the very center, it's just kind of that blue color, and I want to make it look like the material has a bit more depth and add some kind of dark blue in the center. So what I'm going to do is search for the layer weight node, drop this here, and I'm going to Control Shift select it and then Control Shift select it again to preview the facing value. So with the facing value, it's sort of the opposite. So you can see we have white here on the edges, but then we have black in the center, and it's kind of wobbly and kind of bumpy and noisy because that's the shape of the object. And then also we can change the blend value to make it like more and less of the black. I'm going to turn the blend value to a 0.8, just a 0.8, so there's a little bit less of the black. Now what I want to do is make it a bit more contrasted, so I'm going to search for color ramp, and we'll drop the color ramp here after the layer weight, and then what I can do is drag the black tab over a little bit, and then I'll drag the white tab over a little bit as well. So now what I want to do is I want to mix it in so that the black parts are showing up here on the blue Fresnel. So to do this, I'm going to search for a mix color. I'll drop it here, and I'm going to take the bottom one here, the bottom color ramp, and put that into color B, and then I'll Control Shift select the mix to preview it, and then I want to take the color ramp and I want to put this into the factor. So this way, color A, if I change color A, that is going to be the color of the center. So you can see that's adding a lot more detail. So for color A, I'm going to make this a nice dark blue. And if you want to use the same hex value that I'm using for this dark blue here on color A, then you can punch in 081460. So now you can see it has a lot more depth because there's kind of white on the edges, then there's light blue, and then there's dark blue in the middle. So this is going to be put into the emission. So let's open up the emission here, and then the mix result can go into the color, and I'll just Control Shift select the principled shader, and then we want to turn the emission strength up, and I'm going to turn it up to 2 so it's a bit brighter. And then let's also add the base color here for the principled shader. So for the base color, I'm just going to make it like a strong blue color. It's not going to affect the material that much, but it will a little bit. And you can use the same hex code if you want to, which is going to be 0066F2. So now what I want to do is add the same DNA material to the other DNA. So we'll select the DNA, add the DNA material, we'll select this one, and I'll add the DNA material. So now what I want to do is create a world background. So we're going to click here on the object shading, and we're going to change this to world. So here's the world background. So let's go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for a noise texture and drop it here. And the noise factor can go into the color of the background. So now you can see we have noise in the background. Now on the 3D type, let's change this to 4D. And so with the 4D type, we're going to have this W value, which you can use to kind of randomize the noise. Then here on the scale, I'll turn this to 1. And then I'll turn the detail up to a 5, so there's a little bit more detail. And then I'll turn the roughness up to a 0.7. So there's a little bit more detail as well. Now what I want to do is customize the colors. So I'm going to search for a color ramp. So we'll add a color ramp here between the noise and the background. And I can drag the black tab over, which is going to make it more visible. Then I want to customize the colors. So on the black here, I'm going to make this like a really dark blue. And then here on the white color, I'm going to make this like a light blue. And if you want to use the same hex code for the dark blue, this is going to be a hex code of 000B61. And then for the light blue, this is going to be a hex code of A0DDE7. Now what I also want to do is I want to animate this W value, and I want to slowly animate it just to add like a cool animation where this is just slowly moving. So I need to make a timeline. So if I click up here in the corner, I'm going to click and drag down to split the window. And then I can click here, drag over and let go just to split that. And then if I click right behind me here in the very corner, I want to change this to the timeline. So now I want to go all the way over here to frame 0, and I want to select the noise texture. And here in the W value, I'll hover my mouse over it and hit I to inset a keyframe. Then I'm going to go to the very end. So for the end, that is frame 251. And I'm going to turn the W to a 0.2. I think just turning it to 0.2 is pretty nice, because if you move it too much, if you make it like 1 or 5 or 10, then it's going to just be super noisy and be moving all around all the time. I'm just going to turn it to a 0.2 and then hit the I key to inset a keyframe. Then if you select the noise texture and hit the A key in the timeline to select the keyframes, we'll hit T, and we're going to set the interpolation to linear so it moves consistently. So now you can kind of see, if you just look here at the background, it is just slowly kind of noisy and just slowly changing. And I do want it to be quite subtle, because I found if you animate it too fast, it just looks a bit weird. So now we're ready to make some particles. So I'll go back here to the layout and hit Ctrl S to save. And let's go here to the particle properties. Let's hit Shift A to make a particle. And I'm going to go here to mesh and add a icosphere. Now for the icosphere, if I just click right behind me on the add icosphere settings, I'm going to turn the subdivisions up to 3 so it is a bit smooth. But if you find that this is lagging your scene too much because there's too many high detailed particles, then you could just turn the subdivisions down to a 1 or a 2. But I'm going to turn it to 3 and then close the add icosphere settings. So I'm going to use the object context menu and just shade it smooth. And then I just want to put the icosphere maybe down here somewhere where you can't see it. Let's go to the material settings. We'll click on the drop down and we're going to add the DNA material to that particle. So now what I want to do is add a large cube here in the scene where the particles are going to be. So I'll go to the add menu and I'm going to add a cube. I'll hit tab for edit mode, and in edit mode I'm just going to scale it up so it's quite big and just drag it or scale it. We'll scale it up on the y-axis like that so it's a little bit bigger, something like that. So maybe I'll hit G to grab, move it over, and I could probably go into edit mode and scale it down a bit. I probably don't need it to be that big. And what I could also do is scale it along the z-axis and just scale it down a bit so it's a little bit more thin. So if I hit 0 to go into the camera view, that's pretty good. So now we'll select the cube and we're going to go here to the particle properties and we'll click on the plus to add a new particle system. And we want the type to be set to emitter. And then we can go here to the emission number and I'm going to set this to 8,000. So there's a lot more particles. Now what I want to do is have it so that when the animation starts at frame 1, all the particles are already going to be in the scene. So here on the frame start, I'm going to make this negative 100. So basically in the negative values in the timeline, that's where it's going to start. And then the end value is when all the particles will be added. So I'm going to turn this to 0. So basically by the time it gets to 0, all the particles will be already in the scene. So if I hit the spacebar to play this, you can already see there's all those particles and they're starting to fall. Now here in the lifetime, I want to make sure that they never end or they never go away. So I'm going to turn this to like 10,000 just so that the particle's lifetime is super long. Now if I open up the source here, what I want to do is zoom out here and you can see all the particles are added on the faces. But instead of them being added kind of on the faces, so in the corners, I want them to be added all the way here inside the scene. So we're going to turn the emit from to volume. And then if I go back to the starting and play this, you can see now all the particles are just like in the scene. So it kind of looks like a snowfall effect. Now I want to make it render the icosphere that we added because right now these won't really show up in the render. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to go to the render tab. And the render as, we're going to change it from halo to object. And then we're going to go down here to the instance object and we're going to scroll down and just add the single icosphere which is in the scene. Then we can change the scale. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and go into the rendered viewport mode. So I do want the particles to be kind of small, but if they're too small, they won't really be that visible. So I'm going to turn the scale to a 0.15. So they're all a little bit bigger. And then this scale randomness, I'll turn this to a 0.5, which will make some of them like half the size. Now what I also want to do is turn off this show emitter. And the show emitter there, that is the actual box. But I don't want this box to be visible in the render. I want the box to be hidden. So we're going to turn off that show emitter. But then I also want it to be gone in the viewport. So if we close the render, we're going to open up the viewport display. And we're also going to turn off the show emitter so it's gone. So now I can just kind of play this and watch them fall. But instead of them falling, I just want them to float around. So I'm going to scroll down here and we're going to go to the field weights, and here on the gravity, I'm going to turn the gravity to 0 so the gravity isn't affecting the particles. So now you can see the particles are just kind of slowly moving around, but I want them to just kind of move around a bit more randomly. So we're going to close these settings and we're going to go to the physics, and under forces Brownian, I'm going to turn the Brownian to 10. This way, if I go back to the starting and play this, they're going to move around quite a bit more randomly. But now they're moving a bit too fast. So I'm going to open up the integration, and here on the time step, we can change this to make the animation a bit slower, or it'll just make the particles a bit slower. So I'm going to turn the time step to a 0.02. This way, if I hit the spacebar to play, they're only going to move at half the speed. Before I actually render the animation, I definitely want to bake this, because if you don't bake the animation, there might be some glitches or issues, and the particles just might not move correctly. So what I'm going to do is open up the cache here, and I'm just going to hit Control S to save the project again, and then I'll click on the bake button, and I'm just going to wait for it to go through here and just bake the animation. Alright, so the animation is baked, so if I hit the spacebar to play this, we now have a nice particle animation, and that makes it look very atmospheric. So now what I want to do is add a depth of field. So what I'm going to do is place the 3D cursor right here. So you can just hold down Shift and then right click to place the 3D cursor and place it somewhere kind of in the middle of the DNA strand. Then I'll hit Shift A for the add menu, and I'm just going to go here to empty and just add a plane axis empty. And why I'm adding the plane axis is because it doesn't have any visible faces, so it won't show up in the render. I'm just going to scale it down a bit. And then what I want to do is select the camera by clicking right up here. Let's go to the camera settings. And then what I want to do is turn on the depth of field. We'll open this up and we're going to choose a focus object. So we'll click on the eyedropper and we're going to choose this empty. Then let's go here to the f-stop, and I'll turn this way down to maybe like a 0.05. So 0.05, so it's a very strong depth of field. So now you can see everything in the background is very blurred, but I think that looks really cool. And then you can just see some of the particles which are closer up are more visible, but then many of them are very blurred. So it gives a really cool effect. So I'm going to hit Control S to save the project, and then I'll hit F12 to render a final image. Alright, so there is the rendered image, but we're definitely going to make this look a lot nicer and a lot more interesting by doing compositing. So let's click over here to go to the compositing workspace, and I'll click on new to add new compositing nodes. So let's hit Shift A for the add menu, and I'm going to start to type in bloom, and we're going to add the filter glare bloom and just drop this here between the render layers and this group output. And then here on the medium type, on the quality, I'm going to turn this to high quality instead. Then on the strength, I'm going to turn this up to 2. So now you can see we're getting a little bit of glowing there. It's a subtle glow on those brighter areas. Then what I want to do is add the toon image. So we're going to click right here from the asset shelf. We're going to drag and drop the toon image and just drop it here after the glare. And I'm going to click and then drag down on the clarity, detail, and sharpen, and then let go. And I'm going to turn these to a 0.1. So by turning the clarity and the detail and the sharpen to 0.1, it's just going to kind of make the image just a bit more crisp and a bit more sharp and kind of sharpen up the edges. Then what I want to do is add the chromatic aberration. So it's way behind me in the very corner there. Drag the chromatic aberration and drop it here, and we're going to stick it after the toon image. Now on the scale type, I'm going to change this to lens dispersion instead, and then on the factor, I'll just turn it to a 0.1 so it's more subtle. But now you can look here on the edges, we're getting this really cool kind of sci-fi lens distortion effect. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is click on the vignette, and the vignette's right up here, right above me with kind of the darkening around the image. So we're going to drop the vignette here. Now let's drop the vignette here after the chromatic aberration. Now I'm going to turn the factor down to maybe around a 0.7, and the feather I think I'll leave to a 0.4, but you can change the feather to kind of change the sharpness of the edge, and then the factor is just the overall strength. And then if you want to just kind of color correct the image a little bit more, what you could do is search for the RGB curves. And let's drop the RGB curves right here after the toon image. I'm just going to have it affect the image after the toon image. And what I can do is on the C here, for contrast, I can click here to add a dot and drag it up a bit. And then click here to add another dot and drag this dot down a little bit. So that makes everything a bit darker, and I like it a bit of a darker look. And then if you drag this one up here, it's going to make it a bit more contrasted. All right, so we are ready to render this to a final animation. So I'm going to go here to the output properties, and I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to click on this file icon to set an output. And here in my project files, I'm going to click on the plus here to add a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder frames, and then double click to go into the folder, and then click on the accept button. So it's going to render out all the frames into that folder. And then right over here on the media type, we're going to render it as images. And on the file format, you could use PNG or JPEG if you want to make the file size a bit smaller. But let's hit Control S to save. And then we're going to click on render and render the animation. So once the rendering is finished, we're going to open up a completely new Blender file. And we're going to click on File. We're going to click on New. And we're going to go here to video editing and just add a new video editing layout. So here's our video editing layout. So then here in the sequencer, I'll hit Shift A, and I'm going to go to Image Sequence. Then what you can do is locate to the folder where you saved the rendered frames. I'll hit A to select the frames and click on Add Image Strip and just drop it here. Then if your playhead is right here on frame 1, you can hit Shift S, which is going to bring the frames over to frame 1. And now I can hit the spacebar just to watch the finished animation. Then of course you can add music or sound effects, whatever you want to do. And then to render this out to a final video, we'll go here to the output properties. I'm going to scroll down here and we'll go to the output and set a file for the output. And I can just save it in the same folder with my project files and just accept that. Then here on the media type, I'll set it to video. And then I'm pretty much going to leave all the settings at the default here. So if you open up the encoding, I'm going to use the container of MPEG-4, the video codec of H.264, the output quality as medium, and the encoding speed is good. And then if you do want to add audio, I like to use the audio codec of AAC. So then if you want to, you can save the video editing project and then just click on render and render your final video. So that is how to create this DNA strand medical visualization animation. So thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you'd like to purchase the tutorial project files and help support the channel, you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. The links are in the video description. So I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.